So, ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting in the 10th session of Language Skills for Research Communication. And so far, we have navigated universals of research communication. Particularly, we were looking at how two sorts of engineering could be helpful for your research writing and research articulation. The first is the linguistic or language engineering. The second was prompt engineering. And we had a third strand as well, that was the ethical use of generative AI as a wonderful tool to assist our research journey. So with these three strands joining together, we are going to go ahead with the 10th session, where we are going to navigate how method section, how results and discussion section could be better articulated in your research. We have navigated through how to begin with our introduction, the language aspect, the ethical AI aspect, and of course, how can you get through the reviewer's gateway in any scientific journal. All of my talk is typically bound by research which are done on science writing. And therefore, what I'm speaking is, I assure, is up to date and is on the standards, status quo of present-day realities of research communication in the world. So having navigated introduction and the literature review last week, now we are looking at the method section. Okay, to begin with, now, if you look at the title that I set here on my slides, that is about precision and replicability. Precision and replicability. Those are actually the two key terms associated with methods. Your method has to be scientifically precise. Your method has to be precise in terms of the scope, and your method has to be precise in terms of the status quo of the methodology of your field. That is about precision. And if your method is actually precise, there is no doubt about its replicability. Replicability means whatever the study that you do in a particular circumstance under such conditions that you define could be duplicated, could be done equally by anyone who would read, who would see, who would understand your research in any part of the world. So precision and replicability are two key terminologies associated with the method section. Why I put such an emphasis on these two things is for a specific reason. It has a specific reason. The reason is nothing but methods, results and discussion, and conclusion are actually your story. Entire research is indeed your story, but its introduction, its literature review is based on the stories of others. Quite simply, how other researchers do and how your research is going to be located in the mid of the other researchers. That is what introduction and the literature review tells in your story of research. So it is partly not your own story. It's your story, how it's going to be pitched, positioned, located in the mid of the other stories, other research. But when you come into the method section, and when you come into the results and discussion, and particularly to the concluding section, the entire story is yours. So that you are speaking with the facts and evidences you gained from your experiment, with your research, and you are speaking your own plot. You are speaking your own character. You are speaking your own research, and it's completely yours. So that this is the place This is the section, or rather, these are the sections that can naturally pitch your research rigor, your research potential to your reader, starting from your journal reviewer, starting from your supervisor, to anyone who reads your manuscript. These are the sections where you can pitch yourself very precisely. So, keeping that whole essence in the mind, let us move forth. But before we move forth, I'm asking from you to simply send in chat the two key terms that I happen to highlight so far, which are really, really, really relevant in the sections we are going to discuss. The key terms that we were discussing, send in chat so that I know that you are in touch of that particular aspect. What were the two key terms that I emphasized in my introduction so far? Thank you, Aslam. Thank you, Rangana. Pramoda, thank you. That gives me pleasure that at least there are three of you STEM researchers who are listening attentively to what I'm going to talk from behind this screen. Thank you. Let's go ahead. So let me reveal the answer. The two key terms that we consider very, very significant in our discussion today are precision and replicability. Precision and replicability. Thank you. Let's go ahead. You know, when your research is positioned in the hands of a reviewer, in the hands of a desk editor of a journal, in the hands of your supervisor, and in the hands of your examiner, they particularly look at your methodology, looking for certain things. And they include these three main things. Look at them and try to pick them up. Completeness. Your method has to be completely articulated from beginning, in the mid, and to the end. How your method is articulated is one considerable aspect. Completeness. Number two, having told the complete method that you're occupying in your research, you then should look at why such a method and particular procedures that you have chosen in your story, your study, why did you select them? We call it justification. So your particular methodology should be substantiated with sufficient justification to make it speak loud. Yes, this is the method. So that convincing should be given to your editor, to be given to your desk editor, your reviewer, and of course your examiner. So keep in mind, method section should bring a complete scientific method, which is clear at the beginning, in the center, and in the end. And of course, in your methods, why you choose that particular method and particular tool, particular procedures, and particular steps, you have to be specifically justify what you did so. That is the second consideration. And when you establish or when you fulfill these two requirements, remember, your expression is clear enough, which we call clarity. Clear data treatment and statistical analysis. Now, remember, a clear, crystal clear method can go viral or can go absurd without not properly or without improper collection of data or with improper statistical analysis, with improper triangulation method. So, my dear friends, keep in mind that these three things critically tell you whether your method section is substantially fitting, whether it is completely articulated, whether it is sufficiently justified, and whether you add clarity to your decision on methods by bringing how data are treated, where and when data are collected, and what statistical analysis is particularly used, and how you're going to triangulate your data. So remember, method section where you first begin your story in your own pitch, in your own strength, and in your own narrative. These three aspects need clear emphasis. Look at the key question that I have highlighted down there. Could a peer in your field repeat this experiment based solely on your text? What I'm asking, when you completely articulate your research method, when you justify substantially why you choose such procedures, and when you tell which data points, what are the data points, and what analysis are you using, and where you are triangulating, when you did the write-up, ask from yourself as a checklist question, what is it? Could a peer in your field repeat this experiment based solely on your text? If your answer is yes, then ask, sure, how far? If it is 100%, then your methodology section is clearly articulated. That's why I said precision and replicability. Now, this key question you see is arising from that second key term. What is it? Replicability. Upon revealing your methodology, it should be the ability of the reader to actually replicate your data, replicate your study elsewhere in any part of the world. Did you get the point? Did you get the point? Now, up to now, I actually took very serious set of concerns regarding your methods. Can somebody put in your own words whether you are beginning to look at method section in a way far more different than you thought it was? Is my question clear? Having listened to my introduction so far on my first slide and the second slide, have you sensed that method section is going to be not exactly what you thought of, but it has some other blueprint secrets inside of it? How many of you have sensed that, or rather, how many of you have sensed that, oh my God, what I thought what should methodology be is exactly what it is as this man speaks? So can I hear or see from chats how you sense it? I'm simply asking whether you found any moment of aha. If you have found any aha moment, Oh my God, yes, yes, method is this. Yes, indeed. That's my pleasure. And let me say how you sensed it. Bhanuka, wonderful. I'm great. I'm grateful to you. Right now, I was checking my papers methodology section. Okay. Thank you, Rangana. Hmm? Yes, Pramoda, because you were known, but until you articulate it, you never have thought those three aspects, those two terms that I articulated in the first slide as so much important. Now, what I'm saying all this is mostly most of your research is rejected at the desk of the reviewer for defects in methodology, particularly if the method is not precisely spoken or articulated or written. If it is not a sort of, if it is not properly written precisely, it is difficult for someone else to replicate it. So, precision and replicability are the two conditions that you have to meet upon completion of your method section. Keep it, or rather give it a read couple of times, unless you will be questioned by your examiner or by your reviewer or by the uh, supervisor. Indeed. Thank you, Pramoda, Rangana, and Bhanuka, for your responses. Yes, they encourage me to go ahead. Well, let's move on and see how we are going to do that. So if you look at the general organization of a method section, I'm talking here about two particular aspects. The first thing is logical flow. The other thing is the opening. Let me look at what this message says. Support with examples from peer-reviewed journals. Subhashini, what you try to say is not really clear to me. Yes, there where you actually substantiate or rather justify your methods and all, yes, from other methods, yeah. I did not actually detect whether you are asking a question or whether you are giving me an input. Subhashini? Or rather you are requesting
No,
me to...
sir. I just no, sir. If we are writing a methodology section, sometimes they are asking some. If it is a standard, we cannot put that standard method. We need to refer some peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah. Yes, what Subhashini says is quite right. When your reviewer says, refer to these journals and that and the other, it means that your methodology has not substantially justified by looking at where the other researchers are presently engaged in. That's why I say in STEM research, you have to be updated on the research that is happening around the world up to its status quo. Status quo in the sense up to now, how far it has evolved. And to see that, you have to refer to reviewed journals, peer-reviewed journals, where you see that their methods are of this and that standard, and you have to put your method either in the same standard or in a standard far better than that. Thank you, Subhashini, for your inputs. So let's look at what this slide is going to speak. Now, how should you structure structure your method section? As it advises, you have to follow a chronological or consistent order of results. Now, imagine that you are doing a design-based research where you have to first diagnose, then design, and then evaluate. So your flow of the method section should follow the design-based research chronology. Design, diagnose, design, and evaluate. The same way, you have to follow the chronology of the method, and you have to be consistent with the order of results as well. You cannot talk about the last section first and the second section last and first section the second. You can't do that. So the very logical flow should start with the chronological order of your method, because if you test your method with the peer-reviewed journals, how it began, how it goes, and where it ends, you know, Muller, Mather, Hager, you know the beginning, the mid, and the end. And you have to follow that chronology order. And remember, subheadings are essential for guiding the reader through pages. Now remember, under the method section, do not avoid the subheadings, because the subheadings indeed guide you write it properly, as well as guide your reader reads and understands it properly. So never leave the subheadings aside, keep them as it is, and under them write your description. So sampling, data collection, analysis, data triangulation, and all those sections has to be properly subheaded. So logical flow aspect is clear, I wish, in your methodology section. And let's look at how and what typical mistakes you are doing in the opening. Now, you had an introduction of the research article at the beginning. You had an introduction of the thesis as your first chapter. Now, since you have given introduction in the first chapter or in the introductory section, you don't need to go on lengthy general statements right now. You are beginning a section of your long story, of which half of it is told up to now. So that method section do not need general statements. Avoid them. Start it bluntly, directly with the materials or the first procedure. Start with the first procedure, procedure 1, or rather start with the materials first. So that is it. Look at the example given here. Frontocerebral cortices were dissected from. You see, it's directly how you began the method. And you do not say, we started the experiment by doing and doing and doing. Yeah, the offering could be somewhat like that, but you can keep yourself aside a little, and you can simply start with the first procedure of the methodology to begin your method section. So never miss these two aspects. Do not go into lengthy general blah, blah, blah general statements. Start directly with your procedures. And remember, follow the chronological or consistent order of either your order is consistent with the way that you present results, or else your order or rather flow of your methodology is consistent with the chronology of the method itself. As I exemplified in design-based research, most of STEM researchers are design-based. So there you see the diagnose, design, and evaluation are the 3 steps, so that you will be starting with diagnose and then design and then evaluation. So I think the content that I wish to discuss with you on this slide is enough and let me ask whether it is clear. If you see it is clear enough, I would love to see a thumbs up to help me cheer what I'm doing here. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. So now let's look at the language engineering aspect, grammar focus. Why do we need past simple? That is to indicate the actions happened or rather completed, performed, finished. By the time you write the method section, unlike in your proposal, now one of the critical points that you miss sometimes is in your proposal, you propose a method on which you have a bit of a futuristic idea when you're writing your proposal. But by the time when you write your method section of your research final publication or your thesis, you know that the work is done. Decisions are made, data were collected. So if it is done and dusted research, you don't need to go back and forth in future and present. You can simply hang on present and past simple. So to indicate all the things completed, you can use the past tense, whereas uh, within the method section where there are things which are apparently standard descriptions or are the established methods or software, particularly, there you have to say present simple. So for example, the software calculates the meaning. So it's not truly software calculated the meaning because that software can still calculate the mean, right? So such facts, when they come in your results or other method section, remember that what they are articulated in present simple. And simple present tense is to use things which are used. Simple present tense is used to indicate things which are facts, which are established, and which are actually universal. Universal in the sense they can be true at any given moment of time. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a grammar focus, but just look at the note. Keep the tense usage consistent. What do you mean by consistency of tense usage? Quite simple. When you say the software calculates the meaning, you at one point say the software calculates the mean as this, and you cannot in a later point say the calculated software mean was, right? Did you get the point? The software calculates the mean, and then in another sentence you say the calculated mean was. So what happens? You miss a bit between present and past. The calculation done by the software is a fact so that you can use present simple. Well, is that little trick clear? Or have you got any question to ask on this little tip of language engineering? Friends, I'm waiting for your response. Yes, Mahesh? Language engineering, empirical thinking, and interpretation are also important for very logical flow. Indeed, testing methods as well as peer review. Well, true, these are typically the processes that can make your method section precisely articulated. Thank you, Mahesh. Friends, have you got anything to add? Grammar focus. Do not mess up with the tense. Maintain it from the beginning to end. Yes, Pramoda. Well, let's move on. Let's move on. Now, this is once again not the language engineering, but passive voice, that is about the structure. Now, there is a popular myth. What's the popular myth? People think that methods must be written entirely passive. It was done, measurements were done, and so on. But the truth, or rather the reality is, active voice is acceptable and often clearer. Now, I cannot prescribe use only active voice or use only passive voice or a mix, but I can prescribe you one thing. What is it? Look for a previous article recently published in the same journal and see what sort of a language is used therein. That will give you the hint. But you have to overcome the myth. You have to clear the myth. What's it? Methods should not be an entirely passively written statement. It can include active voice. And remember that when you use active voice, things are much, much clear, or they are clearer. Look at the right-hand side of the slide. How this myth and reality could be pursued. If you look at this example, you will see a long string of passive sentences sounds like a shopping list, can be tedious to read, isn't it? So, what is the solution? Combine sentences or switch voices to improve flow. Now, to improve your flow, switch between tenses. Not tenses, switch between voices. Active and passive. And a better switching between the tenses actually invite your reader to not to be exhausted, but to be engaged and follow your method section clearly. So it's clear, and let's move on. We are going to break the monotony with a little activity. Now, I'm not marking your attendance, you know. You know why I don't mark this your attendance? It's because when I keep a window to mark the attendance that wastes our time, that time you can use it as a spare time for us to leave and finish our session early. The second thing is, attendance should not be such a stress. Your attendance could be taken by looking at your responses on activity, right? I can look at activities. In the first activity, how many of you have responded? That's a clue in my chat. Oh, yes, they were present. And if anyone was unable or a little late to post your response in the chat, you can indeed post it later into the chat. It's totally fine. And of course, if you miss the activity 1, never miss activity 2. So I'll be triangulating your attendance from activity 1 submission to activity 2 submission to activity 3 and so on. So let's break the monotony. Now look at your task is you are invited to rewrite your own procedure steps to avoid starting every sentence with the noun and then verb and past participle. So look at the text. The solution was heated, then it was filtered, then it was analyzed. You see, the solution, then filtered, then analyzed. You see, it seems a bit of a repetitive shopping list, or rather, a novice writing instruction. Well, Subhashini, I'll answer your question in a while. Give me some time because I want to just finish this activity clearing. And once you're doing your activity, I'll come into your question. Yes. So you see, this is a bit of a repetitive shopping list. And here on the right hand side, we have given improved strategy, combine actions. And you see the better version. The solution was heated and filtered and then analyzed. Okay, now you have seen a critique on the left and the improvement strategy on the right. And take your studies simple procedure, maybe any procedure that you use in your own study, and rewrite your own procedure steps to avoid starting every sentence with the performed, the passive, and quite simply the lethargic old way of what? Writing method section. Take your time. I'll be giving you about 3 minutes, yeah, for starting your submission. Here on chat, you have to send. Think of your own procedure. Think of a particular step, right? And explain it just in a single sentence, maybe a couple of steps. You put them together in a combined, better improved version with clarity, with novelty breaking the monotony of simple passive voice. Well, time counts. Send me your testimony. I'm waiting for your answers to appear. Now, Nipuni, yes, your sequencing is good, but still, if you say first, after, finally, yes, you have to tell those in sequence, true. But don't you see, you are using completely a passive voice. I'm advising you to use a mix of them. Don't be so lethargic when you speak your method section, particularly when you clear your procedures. Now, Risma, you are also going into a completely passive sentence. Okay. The collected data were cleaned and analyzed using qualitative and quantitative methods. Okay, you could have written it something like the collected data were cleaned, full stop. Analysis happened first in qualitatively and then in quantitative measures. See how nice it's going to be then. So you put a passive sentence first, and then with an active sentence, you get the reader involved back again. I'm just suggesting it doesn't mean that, first passive, then active, and so on.
Yeah, so that's a good way. Got it, sir. Thank you, sir, for the feedback.
And Rangana, yes, promote the actor, process or purpose to the subject. Start with an action, condition, or context rather than a noun. Combine 2 or 3 actions according to the order, as in the given example slide. So is that the way that you prompted? Buddhima, Buddhima, in your case, you're repeating the order, the order, the order, the order, right? That's gonna narrate a story very passively. This is good to be. This would be great for you to put your child in sleep. When he understands nothing, he'll certainly be in sleep. Don't use that method. Make it a little engaged. Well, I'm not going to actually look at everyone and simply give a comment, but I will do it leisurely. And Nipuni asks a question. When writing a research paper, is it okay to use active voice also, sir? Nipuni, the answer is this. It was an all-day tradition to use passive dominated. Nowadays, people do like even using active voice. To get the answer for this, the best thing is, if you're writing a research paper to a particular journal, read. I'm sorry. There was a bit of an interruption. Hope you can hear me, right? Minura, after collecting the baseline data, HVAC energy consumption and indoor environment parameter were monitored continuously and analyzed to assess the impact of the smart thermostat. Okay. But still, yes, that's a very well combined sentence. Perhaps if you're going to use this sentence, the next sentence I would love to see in active voice, right? Just to break the monotony and to get your learner, get your reader engaged. Well, thank you. Most of you were submitting, and I'm inviting everyone else who did not submit to consider submitting, because that will give you a chance to make an attempt, and it will give me a chance in the meantime to see whether you got what I've been preaching or rather what I've been discussing. So let's move, shall we? Let's take this last submission by Sachini. After the time series data was collected, the volatility was estimated. And the Gash model was applied to forecast future market volatility. Sachini, good piece of sentence, but let me suggest one thing. You can use the first two steps together. After the time series data was collected, the volatility was estimated. You can have a full stop, right? Then you can begin it to forecast future market volatility, or rather Gash model then forecasted future market volatility. You see? Then things are becoming much, much more engaging. Benefits and challenges were categorized in a systematic way in the environmental, economic, technical, and social dimensions, which offer an empirical basis for policy intervention to establish barriers identified. Mahesh, be careful. Do not load everything in one shot, in one bullet. Segment them. Give it little by little. Because at the end of the day, your idea is to let your reader understood it precisely, right? Yes, you have lots of ideas in mind and you want to tell them, but take a good breath and let your reader understand one step at a time and move swiftly. I think my response did not hurt you. I'm telling it with complete altruism to particularly particularly indicate, because precision is the critical criterion.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, with that, I'm sure we can move on to the next slide.
Okay. For your comments.
Thank you. And let's move on. Hope the others are working on and they'll be submitting their craft in a couple of minutes. Here we go. Now there is a grammar trap. What is this trap? Look at. Allow, then object, then to, and verb. We call this the infinitive form of the verb phrase. Look at the example. The methods allowed us to identify X. You see? Allowed us. Method allowed us. Now you see, following allow, there has to be a direct object coming in. Allowed what? Allowed whom? That answer should be there. And then the infinitive form of the verb, to identify. The method allowed us to identify X precisely. Okay, look at the rule 2. Allow and then noun. Allow, if it goes with object, remember allow, then goes with an object, and then the verb with infinitive phrase. And rule 2 is if you are using allow with a noun, that's precise. This method allowed the identification of X. You see, method allowed identification of X. You see, nominalization or rather identify is put into the noun form. And if you do not put that into the noun form or nominalization, you have to go to the verb phrase form, which is with infinitive to verb, to identify. Look at what I am describing as the error. Do not use allow without an object. Say, for example, this method allows to identify. This method allows to identify. Now, you are losing the object. Method allows to identify. This is non-standard English. Do not go that. Right? Do not keep yourself trapped. You do not be trapped in this. Allow, enable, and permit. They all mean the same. But when you use that verb with object, that's the correct way. Or else, if you are not using an object, make sure that you nominalize the verb form into its noun version as given in the example. You have to write either this method allowed us to identify X, or you have to say this method allowed the identification of X, but not this method allows to identify X. Right? Well, if you found this to be little puzzle right now, I'm giving you time to think, not now, later, and look at this slide once again and try to reflect what it could be meaning. I'm sure when you go through your writing method sections, I'm sure that allow, enable, permit often occurs in your sentences. And when you get them involved in your sentences, make sure this rule of these verbs with object plus infinitive verb form, or else any of these verbs following the noun form of the verb, and go ahead. I'm receiving answers from Okay, great, Rangana. You reflected on it again. The systematic literature review examines how the integration of learning analytics and learning design domains can enhance the teaching learning process. Garuka, anchor length, inclination, and installation position were systematically varied to assess their influence on slope stability. Perfect. Great. I appreciate all of your submissions. Let's move on to the next slide and see what else have we got to say. Now, one of the critical problems with non-native speakers like us, we are non-natives, we are not near-natives, so we often slip when we use the articles. The, an. And an, we do not mess that much, but between and the, we typically mess. And an as indefinite articles, you have to use that particular article indefinitely, or rather indefinite article, when you introduce the concept first. samples were examined with a microscope. Now, this time with a microscope, or rather, you can say with a digital microscope or whatever, right? So, first time when it is introduced, I'm taking a very simple example sentence here, but just look at when it is introduced first, you are using the indefinite article. Once it is introduced, then you switch to the definite article, right? Because you are referring to the thing that you introduced with indefinite article. The microscope was calibrated. Now, if you first tell the story with samples were examined with a microscope, and then you are referring to the same microscope again, so you cannot say a microscope. If you say, the reader might understand that maybe he is using another microscope for. So if you are using the definite article, the microscope was calibrated, you know that it is about the microscope which was mentioned earlier that this bugger is talking, right? Well, there are instances where you have to be careful about zero articles. Some disciplines particularly omit articles. Say, for example, just look at, now, if you get any non-human editor to edit your documents, you will see even University of Moratuwa comes with a definite article. The University of Moratuwa, the Department of Languages, the Department of Chemical and Process Engineering, right? So they tend to use the definite article, but zero article instances are also there, right? So that you have to test by looking at discipline sensitive specific techniques, particularly when it comes to data. Nowadays, it is the norm of many research journals to not to give it finite, definite or indefinite article. But if you read, now, if you could remember my first advice, I told you often, before you do anything, do not rely on my exercises or examples. Just go and read a previous article from the same journal. When you read it, you can trace that it has its own style, and you have to adjust yourself, adapt to those styles that you grasp through reading their article which is published earlier than you, right? Well, those are simple tips, but I'm sure that they're going to be very, very important. Now, this is one of the typical childish question, but I'm answering it. The general rule of using numbers, handling numbers, is that 1 to 10, we typically use words to indicate the number, ONE to indicate 1 instead of the digit 1, right? You can use digits when the number goes beyond 2 digits, 11 and so on. But there is a scientific exception. What is it? Always use digits for measurements. If you are using any number with measurements, go in numbers. But say, for example, there are 3 distinct stages of my research. Now, do not write it as there are the number 3 stages. You have to say there are THREE steps in my research. But if it is about 3 milligrams of something, you do not write 3 in number letters, but you write it in numbers because it follows what? The measurement, right? The other thing is, we advise you now, particularly when you are coming to results and discussion data presentation chapter, you start with facts and figures and numbers. Never start a sentence with a number, right? If there comes one, replace it with replace, or else you may write the number in words. 2 samples were collected, 20 samples were collected. Now here, since it starts the sentence, you go in words 20 samples were, right? Or else you phrase it differently. A total of 20 samples, you see? Just saying 20 at the beginning of a sentence, you say a total of 20. That makes sense. Well, thank you. With that, we are moving to the next bit of yes. Idea? Yes. Ambiguity. Now, when it comes to lists, do not leave an ambiguity where the reader messes. Which list is he referring? Is it the top list or the sub list or the super list? Ambiguity arises when lists are combined with detailed descriptions. So look at, we use buffers A, B, Z containing X, Y, and Z. When you say we use buffers A, B, Z containing X, Y, and Z, it indicates an idea that in all A, B, and C buffers, they had X, Y, and Z in each, right? So this is really, really ambiguous. Now, you can use punctuations such as semicolon to separate complex list items or bullet points for clarity. I think the best way is not to go for semicolons, but for bullet points, because you all are coming from where? STEM fields. Bullets and lists are actually clearer than going for semicolon. But still, semicolon is also a good way to break between lists. Well, with that, we are going to do a bit of a new activity. This is on disambiguating a text. Look at the original text. Employing a platinum wire, rabbit, sheep, and human blood agar plates were inoculated. Look at the issue. Grammatically, this sentence says, rabbit and sheep were inoculated, not the plates. You see, rabbit, sheep, and human blood agar plates. Now you see, agar plates might be slipped through when it comes to employing a platinum wire. Rabbit, sheep, and human blood were inoculated. You see? Do not let this ambiguity comes in. Look at how it is corrected. Employing a platinum wire, we inoculated rabbit, sheep, and human blood agar plates. Now you see, in this disambiguation effort, we have changed 2 things. The first thing is we have switched it to active voice. That made things much more clearer. Secondly, we actually use the critical tool. What did what? It is platinum wire that separated, and then human, sheep, and rabbit blood agar plates then. And particularly when we bring the subject, we who did it, to the sentence, tells particularly who the performer of the action, and at the same time, it clears the ambiguity which was in the first sentence. Though I call it an activity, this is actually a mental activity which we did not really do physically, but it was a sort of a mental activity. You see, bit of a voice change, when necessary, when we invite the doer to come into the sentence, can make a difference. It can reduce or rather clear disambiguity. It can reduce ambiguity, making it disambiguous. Well, ladies and gentlemen, can we move? So now we are coming towards the end of the method section. When it comes to the end of the method section, do not just stop after the last experiment. Common endings typically have statistical analysis methods used, a brief summary of how methodology relates to literature, and a transition. This is something that you typically miss. When you come to the ends of the method section, indicate, prepare, give a signal to your reader. Now, following this, what comes next is the results section, or rather, you should indicate something about what is to come next towards the end of any section. It's the case of every section. So typically, it's a signal in every research paper that when it comes to the end of the method section, typically it comes to what sort of statistical analysis were used, and then a bit of a summary brought the whole methodological idea. Friends, I'm sorry, this digital divide is often disrupting our connectivity. I wish I'm audible now. Am I?
Yes, sir.
I have to be a bit mindful when weak signals are indicated. I usually go muted, or rather I usually go silence and wait until the buffering ends and reconnects. This typically is the global south approaches to distant learning. Sorry, but we are showing our resilience through even these things. We are such a nation, we are such a gene with lots of patience and resilience inheritedly held. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I was indicating you was how to bring one section to an end quite simply. If it is the method section, usually one before the last summary of method section, typically the penultimate point is statistical analysis, and then a brief summary of the methodology, and then you indicate transition. Now you are preparing the reader to move to the next section. Keep those things in mind and let us move with a bit of a checklist of methods section. Once you're done with your method section, take this self-assessment checklist and double check it. Is the description sufficient for replication? I told you replicability is a critical concern. And then see whether the order is logical, whether it is chronologically sequenced as of your typical methodology, or rather whether it is thematically organized, or else whether it is organized in the way that you present results, right? So there has to be logical, either chronologically or thematically. The thing that you should not do is do not be caught up in passive voice domination. Use active voice as well to break the monotony and to clear some ambiguous instances to ensure disambiguity, and double check whether are my numbers and lists unambiguous. So these 4 items are a must, and if you check through these 4 items as a checklist in your method section, I'm sure that you are not going to be referred back by your reviewer asking explanation on procedures, or rather clarity or replicability or preciseness. I wish you are relatively clear now about how to articulate your method section. If it is the case, give me a cheering applaud or a thumbs up or anything you like, so that I know that you guys are ready and we are moving to next slide. And you can ask a question if you have got any. Thank you. So many of you are giving me thumbs ups. Thank you. And can I hear, or rather, can I wait for a question or two if you have got, before we start the discussion on the results section? Any question, big or small? Big questions are most welcome. It is hilarious to see how the subtitles come in when I sarcastically mispronounce question as question. Friends, it seems that you haven't got any questions, so we can move on to the results section. Shall we? Okay. Now, moving to the results section is a very critical point. Before you move into the results section, keep in mind that you indicate that you are taking the transition from your methods to result, right? And keep in mind, particularly in your own mind, urge your mind to think that here the core contribution comes. The core contribution typically comes in the results section, where you tell your reader what results have you got, what data have you harvested, what evidences you bring to prove whatever the hypothesis that you set at the beginning. So let's move and explore what and how we can do it. Now, the very structure of your results section should be driven by hypothesis. Do not dump data. Organize results to answer your initial research questions or hypotheses. Now, in the very order of research question and hypothesis, you have to organize your discussion, or rather results and discussion section. Recommended sequence as indicated here is, on top of everything, you have to bring the main findings. And then, though it is a main finding, once again, you have to bring it in the order of the hypothesis, right? The first hypothesis taken first, and then the main finding of the first hypothesis takes first, and then the secondary and supporting, and so on. So it's from cream to the diluted, minute, trivial aspects. Well, so If your results are negative, right? Even though your results are negative, it's a scientific exploration and you got a negative result. Maybe that negative result could be perhaps the next good finding. Present, even though it is negative, present them honestly. Locate the bad data source in the discussion, not here. You can locate in the discussion how it went negative and how it went bad. But in the results section, locate them honestly, present them honestly, and you can give justification or explanations to it in the discussion, right? So in the results section, you genuinely, altruistically, and honestly give your data to the surface. Your results may be of importance to others, even though they did not support any of your hypotheses. And actually, if you read through most of the data and, for the fear of failing their hypothesis, some people happen to hide some of the data. And let me say, that's why the field of science is little slowed down in its motion. It would have been fastly moving if every researcher honestly present even if their data are bad, if they honestly present, the field is going to evolve so fast. So never worry about whether your hypothesis failed or rather what you planned did not come into sort of evidence, but still, frankly, deal with them. And you can explain or rather justify or delimit those bad data issues in your discussion section. Now, what tense is to use in results section? Now it is results, right? You found them. They can't be any way futuristically signing, right? They do not signal anything futuristic. So you can say we found, the figure found, or rather the data found, not figure found, right? Past simple whenever you bring the findings themselves. And if you are referring to a table or a figure with data, first indicated in graphical form and then described, then you have to come to simple present tense, right? Because you are dealing with a discussion of the diagram telling that the certain figure shows, it reports, it indicates, it highlights, and so on, right? You can, here also, you can have a mix of active and passive voice, but once again, I'm advising you, read for a sample paper from the same journal published earlier than you write this, and that will guide you the amount, the mix, or rather what should be dominating in that article. Good? With that, we are moving to the next slide to see for a little activity, effective figure referencing. Look at what is the best, what is the better, and what is bad, therefore you should avoid. Figure 1 shows the results. Your words, your space. If a particular figure has got nothing to explain further, I think the figure itself has no purpose other than wasting your space and words, right? So avoid them. Now look at this better example. As shown in figure 1, the temperature rose significantly. So you refer to the figure and you give the description. And see the best example. The temperature rose significantly. You indicate what happened, and then you parenthetically indicate where this particular data appear, that is in figure 1, because your Reviewer, your examiner, is reading your research narration, your story of research. While he is reading, you should not interrupt him to look at the figure. Let your story go on, and while going on, give him a simple signal. If you want a further clarification, just refer to the figure, just refer to the table where you would see how it had happened. Right? So, highlights meaning use figure as an evidence, actually not. It is the story that goes on. Figure simply highlights the meaning that you try to convey through your story. Friends, have you ever thought of such things earlier? Before you choose diagrams and all that?
No, sir.
That's why we say there are best practices in figures and table employment. Rangan asks a question, shall we use this best strategy for tables as well? My answer is again a question, why not? Why not? Because I told you now in your thesis, in your research article, what you're doing is you're narrating a story. What is your story? You did a research, right? When you're narrating a story, you should not disturb anything to the story. And if the story needs any highlighting, then bring the figures and all that, right? And when figures are brought, do not give light to the figure, but give light to the fact that you are highlighting, and give the figure or table or whatever evidence that you bring in the confirmer of the very idea. I wish you got the point. We are moving on. Now, comparing results to figures. Do not refer. Now, when you give a figure, and if you're going to explain every figure, every statistic, and every detail, it is in vain that you put it in a table, right? Table gives you almost every data. A figure actually draws patterns of all that in a comprehensive way. The figure or diagram or table itself can speak something. And those things that the figure and table can speak should not be articulated by you in words. In words, what you are articulating is the most salient aspects in the data, in the figures, and in the diagrams. Do not repeat every value from a table to the text. The text should identify trends and key differences, not simply replicate raw data. Look at a table in your draft. Now, this is just a reflective activity. Look at a table that you put in your discussion or rather results section and ask the question, does your text explicitly repeat more than 3 values? If so, delete and replace with a description of the trend. If you talk about particular value 3, if you're talking about 3 values in a sequence, rather than highlighting the 3 values, it's better that you write down what trend it indicates, right? Those are simple, but certain things that not a researcher hardly, easily look at. Researchers do not easily look at things in this analytical or rather in this descriptive sensitivity. So we are here to guide you through where, I'm simply taking a reviewer's angle. I'm simply taking a manuscript editor's angle where your manuscripts, where your results are rejected. And if we can address the points where it has a reason to reject, then your article, your thesis, your abstract is going to be read and published and positioned rightly in the scientific publishing arena. Well, we are moving Now, one of the critical distinctions that you have to make between reporting and interpreting is very significant to discuss here. You know why? Now, reporting is not your duty. Why? You're not a reporter. You actually report and interpret and, of course, analyze your data. So the rule is this: results are your facts and discussion is for interpreting. Now, in the results section, bring the results as the facts and figures. And in the discussion, you go to interpret them. So there is a gray area. You can use interpretive reporting to guide the reader, no worries. Look at what is permissible. Increasingly, X increased, or unexpectedly, Y decreased. You see, look at the two instances. Increasingly, X increased, unexpectedly, Y decreased. Just tell what happened. That is permissible. But in your description, when X increased, some discussion points, say for example, X is increased, which suggests that the mechanism is, oh my God, you are not bringing the facts in, you are getting to fact into a discussion. But remember, in your research paper, there is a separate section for discussion. Leave them for discussion section. So avoid bringing results together with their interpretation together, and keep a safe distance between results and discussion. Never let discussion come into your results, but in your discussion, you can bring the results, not everything, but results and discussion together can be taken in discussion section. Any questions, my dear friends? If you have questions, keep them in mind, or rather tell me, or rather articulate it in a chat box. And in the meantime, look at this activity. Spot the difference. Sentence A, B, and C. Look, the protein levels increased by 50%. Just a result, right? It's a fact found in the research. Look at sentence B. This increase indicates a stress response. That's an inference that you're bringing in, right? What that increase indicates, that's a part of the discussion. Look at C. Surprisingly, the protein levels increased by 50. What happens? There is a commentary coming in. Commentary is the very indication for your reader that 50% increase is something to worry about, something to care about. But you see, in sentence C, you do not go into infer or discuss anything of it, but you just indicate, signal, oh my God, this hike, this increase is significant. Did you see? So which sentence do you think is rightly fitting to your result? Can you choose between A, B, and C? I'm getting votes. I'm not going to comment on them. I'll comment. I'm asking which fits to your results section. So out of the votes that I received, that you casted, sentence A is the best. Yes, indeed, because it brings facts. But what is your opinion about sentence C? Now imagine instead of using sentence A in your results section, you use a sentence C pattern. Can I hear from one of you, if you use sentence C in the place of sentence A, what will you be harming in your story, or what opportunity that you'll be missing? Prangana is indicating surprisingly as not an academic word. Yeah, good guess. Nipuni also, yes. Dharani, you quite simply answered my question. We should let your audience absorb it easily without putting suspense in your results section. If you say you are surprised, or rather the particular result is surprising, that will give unnecessary narratives to the mind of the reader. It is not what we are supposed to do in an academic research reporting or interpreting, right? Reporting is one thing, interpreting is another. And in the interpretation, we might go into such inferences and discussions, but not here in results section. Okay, good. I'm happy that you all have got it, right? Your majority of you indicate the right answer, that is A, right? But sentence B could be a good point to go for discussion section, whereas sentence C would not be good for result section, but perhaps in discussion section with bit more academic tone. Yes. So data visualizing comes at the heart of all research. You know why? It's through data that you're going to decorate your story. It's like, in a movie, there are certain scenes that the audience expects. Maybe action fans do love to see fight stories, and romantic fans love to see the romantic and love scenes, whereas the thriller and suspense audience loves adventurous stuff. The same way, your research has such blend, and they are typically the visualizing artifacts that you bring into your results and discussion. Remember, when you bring these visualizing, remember each item of your visually rich artifact is serving a purpose. Captions should be talking themselves alone. So they could be carefully stand alone as a fact, right? Without reading the facts or rather the statistics in the figure, a reader should be able to understand what the figure says, what the diagram says by looking at its caption. So when you're using captions, do not just give them captions, give them the caption that better describes the data. And remember, you guide your reader with legends to define abbreviations, perhaps legends, perhaps, certain indices, certain things that you hint through legends should be clearly indicated. So the caption, the legends, and the statistics and lines and contours, everything matters, right? So never leave anything as, absurd, senseless diagrams, because your data has to be speaking themselves. They should be speaking on behalf of you to tell your story better, in a way that it could be better understood by your reader. Yes. Here we are. There are two styles that you can use in your results and discussion sector. But once again, before you choose which style to go, you have to read an article from the journal to see whether impersonal or personal stance is prescribed or rather appreciated. Some journals, those who prefer objectivity, love to see impersonal reporting. Results were obtained, means were taken into the consideration, and so on. But it is acceptable in many fields that personal narration is also permissible. Not permissible, it is accepted. We can make it easier to distinguish your new results from established facts, because when you narrate it personally, it brings a bit of an authorship to you, number one. Number two, the facts begin to speak by themselves, right? So before you choose between personal and impersonal, read what the journal prefers, what the institution prefers. If they prefer objectivity, go for that. But there is actually a room for you to include a bit of subjectivity with personal narration, with dominant objective forms that will simply make it little lighter than making it a bit grayer. So never lose that chance. But once again, my advice is read a previous article from the journal to decide on style. Now, when it comes to the research section, as we are coming to a conclusion right now on results section, we are coming to a self-assessment checklist. Before you conclude it, see whether these things have been achieved. Did I highlight key trends? Or rather, did I simply repeat the table data in my description? See, highlighting key trends is the purpose of your description in the results section, particularly. Second point is, did I clearly distinguish my findings from previous works? That's a question that you have to answer, ask from yourself once you're done with your results. And see whether negative results which were there, did you avoid them or did you include them? Ensure that you include them as well, because your harvest is either supporting you or rejecting your hypothesis, but still they are all equally significant. And that's what we call authentic nature of research. The last checklist point is the distinction between findings and meaning clear? Now, whether you have missed anything that should go into the discussion section into results. 10:30. Now, I answered the question of my son. He asked me, when shall I be finishing? That's what I said, 10:30. And it hasn't got anything to this checklist. So friends, we are coming to the last section, the discussion section. To discuss the facts related to discussion section, we have nearly 1 hour, don't worry. I don't wish to go for 1 hour, but let's look at what we can see there. Now remember, now we are going to sell. Now it's like this. You happen to cultivate your own green vegetable in a wonderfully green atmosphere in a greenhouse, right? Your colorful vegetables were now taken to the outlet, right? And your outlet is located in a Sunday fair like what? Supermarket. And you are permitted to speak out loud about your product and its uniqueness. The same applies here. Results and discussion is about, result is all about you pack up in decks and in rows and trays, how nicely it could be seen by your consumer. And now, sitting behind all this data, you have to speak out loud why your vegetable is very unique and why should they pay that price to buy it and why and how it improves their health and consumption. You see? So the discussion section is all about selling your work. You can't simply say labai ganna, but you have to say gunai, sadharanai milagan. Right? We'll see how we can do it. For this, we propose you a structure which is the inverted pyramid. Inverted pyramid is, the heaviest layer is on top. And in the tip, which is we locating at the bottom, we come to the not so heaviest. Inverted pyramidal style of writing for web is this. Start narrower. Summarize your specific main findings first, and then go into broader. Compare with other studies of your field, which you take into consideration in your literature review. And then go broader, where highlighting what implications does your results indicate. Implications for the field, application, and future research could also be part of your discussion. So it should start with summarizing your specific main findings, then compare with other studies and indicating what implications do they bring for future research and application. So this is typically the structure of your conclusion, and we'll see how you start the discussion. There are 3 options provided. Do not simply repeat the results that you indicated in the earlier section. Instead, use one of these 3 options. What's the first option? Remind them slightly, but very strongly, the main hypothesis or your goals. And then go on your discussion. Or rather, bring the research questions and start answering them. Or you can go for the third option, state the main conclusion immediately and the rest one after the other. We prescribe you not option 1, 2, or 3, depending on your context, depending on the robustness of your data, depending on the very nature of your particular article you are looking at, journal you are looking at, and its preferred and most popularly taken method. Choose any of these options. Now, the very important factor in your discussion section is you go into refer back into the literature, right? Why? Because you found your harvest and you're going to tell that your harvest is unique, right? To tell that your harvest is unique, you have to compare it with the harvest of others, which you discussed in the literature review. You must place your work in the context of the story of your field, because literature review tells part of the story of your research as well as the story of your field entirely. And your result speaks your part of the story, right? And there where you have to compare your results with the literature. You can use these standard phrases, and we have given a standard phrases bank for you. It is shared on Moodle. You can use some of them and look at. In support of, if your research is in support of any of the literature discussed, you can use that supportive phrases. Our findings are consistent with, and so on. And if they are really in contrast with a particular dominant research that happened in the past, you can say, in contrast to Smith, our study found, you see. So Smith could be a very sophisticated researcher in the field, but in contrast to that sophisticated reader, you put your data, your harvest, in a contrast, you see. So that is how you go and refer back to literature. And one thing that you have to be careful is handling disagreement. You have to deal with this in a very diplomatic way. You have no right to say a particular author is wrong, right? They are right in their own context, and you have no right to judge on someone else's research, right? And when you deal with that diplomatically, you have to use the technique called explanations for differences. If a particular data is different from a particular study that is dominant, you might substantiate it diplomatically. How? Maybe it could be the differences of context. Maybe it could be the differences of other circumstances, variables and all that, right? Offer explanations for these differences, right? Maybe different sizes, different species, different methods, different approaches perhaps, yeah? They make the difference. So when you say why difference comes, that's a disagreement handling, but still you delimit, or rather you substantiate your explanation diplomatically. How? By giving explanations to them, right? Look at the example. The discrepancy between our results and those of Smith may be due to the different sampling methods used. So you suggest, yeah, my results and Smith's results are different. You know why? It's because the way that Smith sampled and way that I did are different. So in different sampling context, the results could be different. So you are highlighting your own harvest on top of the most exquisite harvest that is available in the field, but still diplomatically. And remember that no single researcher who had done research are wrong, right? Friends, have you thought of these areas when you are dealing with writing all those sections? Tell me frankly. I just need a bit of your response to me, unless I'll be feeling really tired here. Hello, what about your dinner? Have you all got your dinner? Or are you having it right now? Or rather, your family is waiting for you to finish this nonsense and come and sit them with food. Is that what happens out there? We are influencing a bias of the reader. Yeah. Having it. Vanuka, good luck. Since you are not speaking, there won't be any problem, right? With your headset, yes, you can eat. Perfect. But my advice is if you're a scholar, if you're a researcher, do not take a late lunch, late dinner, right? Your dinner has to be between 7 to 8 so that you have time to digest. And by the time you are on bed, the digestion is substantially done, right? So you are supposed to be diplomatic. Look at this explanation here, the example. See how harsh the original sentence. Jones failed to account for temperature, so his data is useless. Oh my God. See how it is rewritten diplomatically. Jones did not explicitly control for temperature, which may explain the difference in observed data. You see? Without their telling that his data is useless, you indirectly, diplomatically indicate he did not explicitly control for temperature, which explain the difference in observed values. You see? So being diplomatic is always a way that you show your reader how sophisticated your study, how sophisticated your writing, and how sophisticated and authentic you and an expert you are as a researcher, right? So this diplomacy in research writing is a very, very crucial concern. Well, shall we move? Yes. So when you're discussing limitations, don't worry about the picture. It did not load here. There is something mandatory. You must admit what your study did not do where it might be weak. Now, when you are discussing limitations, keep in mind that do not try to talk about the things that your study did not intend to do. Maybe while you're doing the research, you might have found that, if my study could be extended to capture this aspect as well, oh my God, how good it is. That could be identified as a limitation, but do not try to indicate or rather take that into a highlight, but you can say it, admit what you did in your research, right? And admit what you did not do in your research as well, so that it tells what limitations, on what limitations this study's results are justified. You see, admit what you did and admit what you did not do, right? Admitting them side by side itself tells the limitations. Before someone highlights you that it would have been better that if this research were extended to this area, before your reviewer tells it, admit in advance, right? And indicate it as a limitation, right? Look at this example. Although the sample size was small, the statistical power was sufficient to detect the main trend, right? You say, before your reviewer tells that your sample size is small, you admit to it genuinely and you say, even though within a small sample you got enough data, robust enough to indicate the trend. You see, this is partly diplomatic and partly, undebatable. So, we are looking at the silver lining. You have a limitation. Your experiment only worked on 25% of the samples. Look at the weak draft. It says it failed 75% of the time. Look at the improved sample. While the methods was effective in 25% of cases, this represents a significant improvement over previous techniques used. You see, This reminds me one of the anecdotes. Now, in one of the interviews, I can't remember where, in a big TV show, it's about cancer survival, surviving cancer patients, and those who happen to survive from cancer. And I still can remember one lady was reflecting on how her doctor was talking about you have just 2% of chance of living, right? When she reflects back on this 2% chance, she did not worry about 98%. She indicated it in this way. How? Doctor said, I have 2% of chance, which is relatively greater than zero. That's how she said, which is significantly greater than zero. It's many times of zero. You see, in this way, you can actually keep a silver lining in your limitations. So limitations could itself be a silver line appearing a dark cloud, which will guide you to spotlight your own result among the rest of the results, not leaving your reviewer to criticize you, not leaving your reviewer to downgrade you, but leaving even the reviewer to think twice. Yep, yeah, they are actually significant. You see? So those are things that you can simply do in your discussion and limitation section. Now we are moving into a bit of a language strategy, what we call hedging, right? You know, it's rarely that 100% certain that some of the findings of science. Science is rarely 100% certain. And perhaps one hypothesis failed in a particular condition might pass in another, so that there is always a chance for anything to happen. So allowing these multiple truths, not a single static truth, we have to ensure that our language speaks these probabilities. The hedging language actually tells the precision, and it's not weakness. Now, if I happen to ask one question, if I ask, shall we stop the lesson right now? If you dare answer just saying yes or no, you are doing injustice to your own intelligence. You know why? If I say, shall we, I indicate I do. It is not I do stop now. It is about shall we. It's not we do stop now. It's shall we. So that I'm asking for a room, a probability for stopping. So you can say we shall not. So you can indicate both ends with shall and shall not. So particularly between 0 and 1, yes and no, there is a range in between 0.1 to 0. Whatever, 0.99999. So all that gray area, or rather all that hedging area, is part and parcel of your language. You see, there are certain verbs that help you hedging your statements or your claims. Suggest, indicate, appear, seem. Without dare telling A is B, you say A suggests signs of B, right? Or rather, A suggests A indicate certain thing of B, right? So these helping verbs, these hedging verbs, actually help us locate our findings are valid in the context we are employing, but in other contexts they might not be valid, so that you add the hedging. And hedging, remember, is part and parcel of your admitting to limitations. So you can indicate limitations clearly, at the same time you can indicate your limitation in your hedging devices of language as well, right? And particularly models, may, might, should, would, could, ought to be, and all that, can, could, would all those helping verbs models are also indicative of this hedging. Look at the example. This suggests that X may be responsible for Y. We do not dare say X is responsible for Y, but there is a suggestion, it's suggesting that for X, Y may be responsible. You see, this hedging is a very critical aspect of your research reporting. It has to be, because it is partly admitting to your limitations. Number one, it is partly because there is a high chance that your study is liable to be replicated by others. And if in such replication, if your findings vary with theirs, if you did not use hedging language, later when the writers read your article, when readers read your article, in your finding, they might find that you did not see the changing nature of realities. So let's move on with hedging. And in an early example, I used a word called surprisingly, indicating some excitement on certain results. But this excitement should be soft indicated softly. You need to sell the importance of the paper. So strong adjectives might do that without going for very strong non-academic category of words. Compelling, significant, unexpected, distinct, robust, and such adjectives would do this excitement in your product selling. In this very case, you should not hide your main findings. Do not hide your main finding in a non-descript paragraph. Put it first. Do not pull your main finding to the body of the discussion or conclusion section. Bring it to the very front, right? Breakthrough, insight, advance. They are strong nouns that can indicate your main findings, or rather the critical finding. A breakthrough signal through our study is, you are indicating your reader, yes, it's a groundbreaking finding. Yes, if there is such a thing, remember that you are selling your product, you are selling your research. Never hesitate to indicate it with strong noun. And one of the critical things when you come to refer to literature and you write your findings, your facts that you found through study is certain confusions that arise when you mix your findings with cited literature. To refer to your work, always use active voice. We found, I found, the study found, right? What is found in this study is, so speak in active when you're talking about your findings. And when you're referring to the others' findings in comparison, in contrast yours, you can go for a passive with proper naming of the researcher, right? So that's a strategy that you can use when you are comparing your literature, your findings with the literature. Well, identifying the author. Just look at, critique this. It was found that X causes Y. However, it was observed that Z blocks this. My God, who found X? Who observed Z? So you can quite distinctly say, Smith found that X causes Y. However, we observed that Z blocks this. So X and Y Their relationship was found by Smith, that is literature, and your study observed something else. You see, identifying the author, you should make it clear, particularly when you pitch your findings in a very strong emphasis to it. So, how do you indicate the ending of the discussion? Don't just stop. Conclude it with a summary of implications you discussed, right? If you haven't done any limitation discussion early, you can bring a limitation to indicate the end of the discussion, right? And you can signal what areas of this research should be touched further in future, right? And remember that in your ending, you refer back to introduction where you began the big problem statement. And the most important thing is when you indicate the last episode of your research, make sure that you typically indicate past, which you explored through literature review, present, which is your research, with the future, that is implications and future research. That connecting of the three dots of past, present, and future is a must in your ending of the discussion, because that's what pitches your research in the big industry of publishing. So this is how we come to the end of the discussion section. You use this checklist to see whether you have done it perfectly. See whether at the end of the day, when you finish your discussion, whether your contribution is clear, whether you highlighted it. Have I been diplomatic when comparing with others? When I compare my results with the others, have I used a diplomatic approach? Did I use hedging language for my claims? When I do a claim, did I use hedging? Or did I tell like Paul Burua, හරියටම මේකමයි වෙන්නේ කියලා කියනවද? Or else whether I'm allowing room for, space for my results to be challenged in future, right? Is the distinction between my work and previous work clear? And did you create three dots trend linked from past to present to future? See whether you have touched those aspects in your discussion section. And this is how the self-assessment checklist, or rather this is how you can double check whether you have done your job correctly. So let us look at a summary of the three sections we've discussed: methods, results, and discussion. If you just look at the focus, methods actually is descriptive, and of course, it's about the precision and replicability, if you could remember. And results is all about objective trends that you indicate that you found out of your results. And discussion is about interpretation and, of course, the content. And I'm not going to refer to the primary tenses, right? In methods, it's going to be past because your method is already employed, right? And results are past findings, but if you're referring to figures, you have to bring into a discussion which is live, therefore you bring present tense. And in discussion, you use present tense, but still you use modal verbs mostly to hedge, to actually indicate hedging and diplomacy in your language. So that is the simple summary of our discussion today. We are a little early, yes, but just a little early. I'm not telling that we are so early. These are the final thoughts. Our glass is complete. What is the hourglass? IMRAD structure of a research paper: introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Hourglass is complete. You have moved from specific details back to the broader field. The key takeaway today is clarity and structure and fancy vocabulary. Fancy vocabulary should not be misunderstood. Fancy means you are facifying it to the limit it could be facified, not over generalizing or over facifying, right? So it's your language that makes that distinction. So the references are given, and before I move into the last thought, I have to indicate a bad news for you this week. This Saturday, we are not going to meet, my dear friends. This Saturday is going to be a holiday for you. And for me, it's going to be a working day because I'm going to host a workshop from 9 a.m. to 12 or 2 p.m. to a different set of audience. Therefore, please pardon me. This Saturday, I won't be able to meet you all, right? But with spirit, we'll be meeting for the last 3-4 lessons yet to come on next Thursday and Saturday and the forthcoming Thursday and Saturday. And we'll be completing the whole structure section by section on literature in a research paper right now. But we'll be looking at front and back matters next week. And we'll be looking at the other trends in research communication as well. So, friends, how do you feel now? It's time for you to speak now. Let me switch on my camera to indicate that I am here. I'm still alive, still not sleepy, still active. How do you feel after these after this whole navigation section by section? Today we actually took 3 sections together, but they should go together because that's where your story comes in. I want some of you to reflect about the way that we navigated through these sections and how it impacted to you, because if you tell how you felt it, how you shaped your writing journey, that will help me to plan the rest of the story, because we are done 2/3 of the story now, the two-third of the lesson series. We are just behind 1/3 or less. Therefore, tell me how you felt and what you gained and what you lost, so that I can shape my future sessions to cover that up. It's over to you, ladies and gentlemen. You can begin with any questions first. Aslam, how do you feel? Thank you, Manura, for the very fact that no research is wrong. Yeah, that's something that we have to philosophically locate our research in, right? Thank you, Aslam, for your compliments. How do you all feel, my dear brothers and sisters? I never called you all students in my life because I'm going to be just a helper to you all. I'm not going to be an expert in your field, but my field is research communication, on which I explored certain things which are relevant to you, and I happen to pour it from my end to yours. Well, Binura asks, some articles combine the results and discussion section while others present them separately. Which approach is preferred? Now, Binura, once and again, the approach that is preferred depends on whether you choose that journal or not. If you choose a particular journal, journal's preferred approach should be your approach, so that there is no one way of writing thing. You have to be adaptable to fit your approach to address the demand of the particular journal you are writing for. Thank you, Danisha. Thank you, Rangana, for your compliments.
Sir, today's session was very informative, sir. Actually, I did not realize that so many aspects we need to consider. So I learned a lot, especially about the methodology section and the result section. So normally, sir, when I writing the journals, in the result section, after the explain the result section, end of that particular test results, I'm writing that discussion session also. Is it correct way? Oh,
Now, if a particular journal prefers, you can read a previous article. If a particular journal prefers combining them together, if you want to get your paper published therein, you have to do that. But the typical rule is results, discussion, and conclusion. If there are sections, those sections serve to those three different purposes. And if there isn't any section break, you have to make that break even with a paragraph break, right?
okay, sir.
Because at the end of the day, we are going to do a deal with yourself and the reader. So reader should swiftly get your idea and distinguish results from discussion, discussion from conclusion and implication. Thank you, Pramoda, for your compliments once again. So the very idea of all this, what we call, we outsiders, we aliens come in to STEM people to teach how to write, is not to improve or rather impose language rules on you, but to tell you how well you can write it, to tell you how nicely can you see a silver line in a dark cloud. So it's all about making it clear for your reader, for your reviewer to understand it, and for the wider community who is going to read your research later to understand it properly and pick it up from there to be part of the literature review in a future world. So friends, thank you very much for your support. You were so generous and genuine, and I'm glad to have a team like you in this series of lessons. And actually, it's at a very hectic time that I decided to undertake this journey without delegating it to someone else, because I realized that, I have to do it by myself, for the very fact that, if I am not going to add that contribution to you, it's going to make things disadvantage for our scholars who are going to publish in future in tomorrow's journals. Thank you. This doesn't mean that all our sessions are over, right? And we'll be certainly meeting after this Saturday. Saturday we won't be meeting, and on next Thursday we'll be meeting, and we'll go ahead and we'll conclude it classy. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for staying awake and be attentive so far. Good night.
Yeah. Thanks very much for your good night.